Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Today, I would like to begin with a small question that we sometimes encounter violence in our daily lives, and most of us often focus only on what happened or who was hurt. But sometimes we ignore something that why would someone choose to hurt in the first place? So for a long time, I could not understand one question. Why would someone choose to hurt a stray animal? And a few years ago, in the neighborhood where I grew up, some people often left food outside for stray cats. The cats lived quietly and most of people barely noticed them. But one day, someone poisoned the cat food. And some people were angry, others said that the cats were a problem anyway. So the conversation quickly shifted from why would someone had chosen the violence to whether the cats deserved to exist. Actually, I could not understand it, because the cats had harmed no one. And even today, I still remember that feeling whenever I pass those places. But the reason I chose this topic was not actually that event. It was because of a friend, Anne. 5 years ago, on a winter evening, Anne's parents had been arguing for hours, and the whole house was filled of shouting. Anne was already stressed and upset. At that time, her cat kept yelling, and finally she lost patience. Anne told me later that she had tried to ignore it at first, but as her parents argued, everything seemed to become louder and more annoying. That the sound of smashing, the sound of shouting, she felt trapped inside the house with nowhere to escape. So at that moment, she did not want to hurt anyone. She only wanted everything to become quiet. And then she carried the cat to the balcony and closed the door. The cat stayed outside all night, and the next morning, Anne found that the cat had just only been asking for the water. She realized that the cat had not been trying to make her life harder. It was simply been asking for something it needed. She immediately brought it back inside, and then she cried. She told me that she couldn't stop thinking about it for days. And at that moment, what stayed with me was that I knew Anne was not a cruel person, and I knew Anne loved her cat. Once I visited her home, I could see her cat sleeping beside her while she was doing homework, and she always remembered to buy its favorite treats and send me photos of it, like doing strange things around the house, chasing toys or just running around. So if someone told me that Anne would one day hurt her own cat, I would never have believed it. But at that night, all the pressure and anger that came from somewhere else landed on the weakest one in that room. Maybe the cat had done nothing wrong. It was simply the easiest target in that space. And that story actually changed the way I think of animal abuse. That sometimes people do not hurt animals because they hate them. Sometimes they hurt animals because animals cannot fight back. Like they cannot argue, they cannot complain, and they cannot leave. So they become the easiest place for someone's emotions to land. And I found that does not only happen to animals. Do you remember that the last time you were in a bad mood, did you snap at someone who had nothing to do with it? I know I have. And the psychologists describe its pattern as the kick the dog effect. This name actually comes from an old observation that after being humiliated by someone more powerful, people do not always confront the real source. Instead, the frustration comes downwards to the weaker targets and to the one who is less powerful. And actually, that is how the pressure is transport from someone who is more powerful to someone who is more vulnerable, that parents pass it to children, and teachers pass it to students, and managers pass it to employees. Each person in that chain passes it to someone who is even less powerful and less likely to fight back. Pressure often travels this way, and sometimes it is another person, sometimes it is an animal. And that is not just something I've observed. Researchers even have a name for it. In criminology, it is called the link. It describes the connection between animal abuse and violence towards people. The researchers found that many of women that between 71% and 83% entering domestic violence shelters reported that their partners had threatened or even killed the family pets before. And the studies have found that many violent offenders had a history of abusing animals when they were young. So abusing animals is really an isolated act. It is actually one of the earliest signs that violence is becoming a way of dealing with anger and control. Psychologists describe it as the displayed aggression, that when people cannot express their anger or pressure towards the real source, they sometimes redirect it towards someone who is less powerful and less likely to fight back. That's why violence always follows the same patterns. It moves downwards to the weaker targets. And so, thus, the animal abuse is bigger than it looks like. That animal abuse is never only about animals or their owners. Today, the victim might be an animal, but tomorrow it might be another person, a child, a partner, or anyone in the weaker position. So, understanding how the violence spreads from the more powerful to the more vulnerable actually help us to think of ways to stop passing it on. I still remember one evening that after arguing with my parents, I was in a bad mood while my friend was inviting me to her birthday. And I knew she had done nothing wrong, but I replied her coldly and I told her I didn't want to go. Actually, she never blamed me, but after sending the message, I still sat there feeling guilty for letting my emotion become someone else's problem. That I knew I had taken my anger out on someone who had nothing to do with it. So that was the time I started paying more attention to my emotions that before they reach someone else who is not the cause in the first place. And I think feeling angry, stressed, or emotionally out of control is very normal, that it does not make you a bad person. More than 80 years ago, the psychologist Zhang and his colleagues proposed a frustration-aggression hypothesis. It describes that when people are frequently blocked from reaching their goal, aggression becomes more likely. And it is not always directed at the real source. So our responsibility is to make sure that our emotions do not end up hurting someone else. And for me, I think music helps me a lot. Like listening to music does not solve my problems immediately, but it actually gives me a pause that gives me enough space for me to calm down and stop before my emotions reach someone else who had nothing to do with it. So just stop for a moment and give yourself a little space. Notice what you are feeling before it reaches someone who had nothing to do with it. Thank you.